Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss. Dragon in the Southern Tier, I'm happy to be here with you today. It is January 20th. It is a Friday, the evening, and in Atlanta, many people are having a difficult night. They are under threat, they are under fear, and it's not the first time. This is not a new thing. How did this happen? Why is it happening now? Will it happen again? Will it happen in other parts of America? These are the questions that we're going to try and attempt to answer for you in this moment. But first, we do want to mention, if this is the first time that you are seeing our channel, we want to welcome you and thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know that every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the social media that we can to speak with you from anywhere in the world to hear what you think about the issues that are affecting us all. And we invite you to be part of the First Amendment. It's not just an American rule, it is part of the world, to be able to say what you believe about the issues that affect you. And no matter where you are in the world, send your chat, your tweets, and your phone calls and join us in that conversation. We hope to see you this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and every Sunday. It's going to be a long weekend in Atlanta. And sadly, it's not the first time. In fact, this is something that's been happening for a very, very long time. Perhaps I should start with this. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. It's something that George Santayana had said in 1905. 1905, over 100 years ago. And that statement is still true today when we look at what's going on in our world. If you have forgotten the past, you are going to repeat it. Atlanta is an example of that right now in America and in the world. Because right now in Atlanta, according to WSB-TV, the DeKalb police are already organizing and increasing their patrols and increasing their vigilance to protect the public because they are under threat, because the city of Atlanta is under threat. Now you may say, well, Mike, why would that be the case? Why are they increasing their activities, the police? Why are they on high alert? Why is the city of Atlanta under threat? Let's go back in time. Let's see what history has told us and why it's repeating at this moment. You may recall this comment as it was said by Nancy Pelosi.
So again, thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice.
There you go. That's the history we have to remember. It was George Floyd. It was 2020. George Floyd died. And that's sad. I'm sure his mom was very upset. George Floyd died for you. And Nancy Pelosi, Democrats across this nation, the far left, want you to feel bad for his life. He gave up his life for you. Except that's not exactly correct. George Floyd was a repeat criminal, a violent criminal, a criminal who had been arrested many times, going to PolitiFact and going to what did he actually do? Well, he was arrested over 9 different times. Let's remember, what did he do? What were the charges that George Floyd was arrested for? Well, he was arrested for theft. He was arrested for aggravated robbery. Going by, this again is the ruling and the review from PolitiFact. He was arrested 4 times on drug possession charges and distribution, drugs that reach our children and kill them. Look at the outbreak and the overdose numbers from fentanyl and heroin that are at record high levels, killing innocent individuals throughout our society. He had 2 theft charges. He had a charge for illegal trespass. He had failure to identify himself and aggravated robbery. These are crimes that he committed, many of them with firearms, something that the left is absolutely against. So George Floyd was no saint. Even though Nancy Pelosi and many on the left would like you to think of him as a saint today, he never was. He was a criminal. He was a violent criminal, a repeat criminal. He was also an addict and a drug dealer. But because George Floyd died in the way that he did, he was elevated from being a petty, violent criminal to being a saint, to being someone to be looked up to have statues made in his image better than what we see with Martin Luther King today. George Floyd is to be emulated, or at least that's what some would like you to believe. And because of his death, we saw riots. We saw riots across this country. In 22 of the largest cities of our country, we saw that George Floyd riots broke out everywhere. We had the city of Portland, over 120 days of continuous night after night rioting, burning down cities. Minneapolis was burned down, $2 billion worth of damage. That's just from the insurance claims, not counting the damage for those who did not have insurance. We saw this in San Francisco. We saw Atlanta, Austin, Boulder, New York City, Washington, D.C. Night after night playing before us, and we covered it on this channel as well. That was the consequence of George Floyd. That one man died badly because of the actions that he had taken throughout his lifetime, and millions suffered. To this day, they are continuing to suffer. In fact, for decades, they will suffer. The city of Minneapolis and its sections of whole swaths of that city being burned down, in Portland, in San Francisco, this is going to affect people for decades. And it's not done. It's something that is continuing to happen even to this day. If you look out, and this is not covered by the major mainstream media, but if you look for it, you will find that there are, in Berkeley, California, the People's Park Autonomous Zone continues to exist. That was on August 4th of 2022. Now, what is an autonomous zone? By definition, an autonomous zone is a region that has been captured, has been taken over by a group of people where the local, state, and federal laws do not exist. That would be called an insurrection, where a group of individuals have captured U.S. territory and have held American citizens by coercion, by violence. They've kidnapped them. And these American citizens are subjected to the rules instituted by these gangs, these thugs, often called ANTIFA, that have decided that the rules no longer apply equally and they will institute their own rules and regulations. That is an insurrection. It's that simple. That is, by definition, an insurrection, an overthrow of government and instituting a new set of rules based on those individuals' desires at that moment. And that exists in America today. We have seen it in 2021 in Minneapolis. We see that today, and we've seen it before in Berkeley. I'll get to what's happening today because that's Atlanta. But Atlanta is not new. The autonomous zone that exists in Atlanta right now, the insurrection zone that exists in Atlanta right now, is something that we have seen in the past and we have forgotten, which is why it has come back. Now, how did that happen? Let's go over that. It was back in 2020 that a criminal, Rayshard Brooks, was drunk and driving, endangering the public, and he was confronted by police officers in a Wendy's parking lot. The police officers spent 20 minutes trying to assess the situation and to calmly allow Mr. Brooks to come with them peaceably for drunk driving. Mr. Brooks initiated violence against those police officers to resist his arrest, got himself armed with a weapon that would enable him to possibly further harm those police officers and or the public as he was attempting to escape the scene of his crime, and he was killed. Now, the major mainstream news media at the time in 2020, they didn't want to mention it quite that way. We covered it. We showed you the body cam footage, the entire body cam footage of the conversation of the police officers and how that entire incident happened. But most of the mainstream media instead decided to take the same approach with George Floyd. Rayshard Brooks was a hero. He was an innocent black man. He did nothing wrong. He was shot down like a dog. None of this is true. None of that is reflected by the actual video, body cam video, of actually what happened. It isn't matched by what the witnesses said in observing the entire incident. But the mainstream media had a message that promoted the far left, Antifa and BLM. It promoted the violence we were seeing across our country to fundamentally change America. That has been the goal for quite some time. And so Rayshard Brooks died. And when Rayshard Brooks died, well, we saw even more riots. And in particular in Atlanta, that Wendy's, that business, the parking lot where the shooting took place, well, that was burned down to the ground. Not because the Wendy's had anything to do with it. The employees had nothing to do with it. This did not involve that business in any way, shape, or form. But because some individuals on the far left were emotional, they burned down someone's business. They made all the people who worked there unemployed because they were angry, because it was them being righteous. And they created an autonomous zone in Atlanta. They blocked off a swath of that area surrounding the Wendy's, and that focal point of their anger, of their emotion, of their insurrection. And they created an area where there were no laws, where the local, state, and federal laws did not apply. And you, the American citizen, you had to beware. If you didn't know, if you made the wrong turn on the road, you were in danger because they were in control, because the laws did not apply. The police were not allowed in. Fire departments were not allowed in. The rule of law was by a group of thugs. And the result of that, well, very simply, an 8-year-old child was killed. An 8-year-old child was killed. The child's parents were driving and they made a wrong turn. They made a left turn instead of a right turn and unwittingly ran into an autonomous zone, an insurrection zone controlled by the far left, motivated by the death of Rayshard Brooks and George Floyd, criminals who were actively fighting against their arrest. They took that opportunity to create their own base of power, an insurrection zone. And these parents paid the ultimate price for that, because as they drove unwittingly towards an insurrection zone, they were shot upon. They were shot a lot. And their 8-year-old child was killed, gunned down, for no reason that anyone could ever possibly excuse. Except it was in the name of Rayshard Brooks. It was in the name of BLM. It was in the name of Antifa. It was in the name of insurrection and destroying the American government, because that was the right thing to do. At least that's their excuse. Now, we covered this. And we covered how even the mayor, the government, everyone came out and said, Black Lives Matters, you killed your own. You killed a child. This was wrong, and you should be called out for it. We covered it at the time. No one in the news media really wanted to discuss this. This was at the same time that we had the riots in Portland, in the Capitol Hill. They called it the CHAZ or the CHOP, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, an insurrection zone. When there were autonomous zones in Austin, in Boulder, they were burning down blocks in New York City, in Brooklyn. But this was just part of that process. It was okay. It was all right. Even if there were live streams, actually news reports from the mainstream news media telling you that these were mostly peaceful protests, that even as they had an act of arson in the background, of buildings burning down and fire departments were stopped from being able to put out the fires, destroying neighborhoods, it was mostly peaceful and it was righteous. How righteous is it that an 8-year-old was killed because a group of thugs decided that this was their opportunity to assert their power? And as we found out, many of the members of this autonomous zone, this insurrection zone, they were gang members. These were gangsters. These were individuals. These were criminals. Not just like George Floyd, not just like Rayshard Brooks, not just like many of the people who we have seen, like in Kenosha, who have long histories of crime and violent crime and sexual crime that we have seen consistently in every single one of these insurrection zones across America. No, in this case, they were gang members. And they were part of those who were responsible for killing that 8-year-old child because her parents drove down the wrong road unwittingly. Now you would think that the death of an 8-year-old child would be something that people would step back and say, wait, we can't do this. Kind of like in the Capitol Hill zone, the Chaz, the autonomous zone in Seattle, when a 16-year-old was killed, a 14-year-old mortally wounded. When we saw that happen, you would think people would stop and say, well, wait, what's going on? In Indianapolis, when Jessica Dottie Whitaker was killed because she had the audacity to say, all lives matter, not just Black lives matter, all lives matter. And that mom, that 23-year-old mom of a child, a baby, was killed. You would think that across America, people would stop and say, that's gone too far. We have arsons live on TV. We have rioting, people like David Dorn being killed. We've got a 16-year-old that's been killed. We've got an 8-year-old that has been killed. This has gone too far. These areas, these zones where American citizens are kidnapped and held prisoner, businesses are subjected to being looted and coerced, where we have no law, where local, state, and federal laws no longer apply and would-be warlords are in control. Often, sometimes gang members and other types of criminals are in control. This is an insurrection, and it is bad. Let's never do this again. Let's not empower these individuals. That's what you would think would be the lesson of 2020. But as I showed you, even in 2022, autonomous zones continued to exist. They continued to function. We know this in Minneapolis. It continued to have them in 2021. In 2022, they continued to exist. And in Atlanta, they continued to exist. This may come to as a surprise to many people, but 7 months ago, we knew that there was an autonomous zone in Atlanta. Andy Ngo was one of the few trying to make the American public aware that these autonomous zones have continued to exist and continue to negatively impact the public, but their excuse has always been, well, they're doing the right thing. They're going to hug trees. They're going to protect the land. They're going to protect a segment of the population. Not all of the people, just some of the people they prefer to promote their agenda. This is what Andy Ngo had to say 7 months ago. 7 months ago.
Actually, what happened is that Antifa and those on the far left mobilized there and started building like barricades and some basic infrastructure. Well, they took over what was already there and claimed it as theirs and said, and had made outlandish claims that the construction of this, what they call the cop city, would lead to more Black and brown people getting killed. It's the same arguments we've heard now for years, that anytime police are funded or there's support for resources for them, that's terrible and that needs to be stalled.
Okay, so that's what Andy No had to say. Let's stop for a moment. So in Atlanta, a city that has been plagued by insurrectionist autonomous zones in the past, that has led to the death of an 8-year-old child, that we have been able to prove and has been seen in court was ruled by gangs and thugs and criminals. This city has embraced even more of these insurrectionist attitudes, these insurrectionist autonomous zones. Now, what is Cop City? Essentially, the city of Atlanta decided that they wanted to increase and improve the training of their police officers, of their firefighters, and their EMS, emergency medical services. They wanted to improve the services they provide to the public. They wanted to train those police officers to be better police officers, better firemen, better EMS. And they had the land owned by the city to be able to do that, a wooded area of the city of Atlanta. And they were going to clear out some of those woodlands to be able to build that facility to improve the quality of life of their citizens, addressing some of the concerns that BLM and Antifa already had, that police were not responsive properly to their concerns. Well, more training is going to help improve that. It's something that BLM and many Democrats have pushed for. More training. Well, okay, they're going to get it. Except those very same people, BLM and Antifa and the far left, said, no, you can't do that. In part because you're cutting down trees. You can't cut down trees to improve the quality of life of the people of Atlanta. In this confusion, well, Rolling Stone actually went down to Atlanta. This is September 3rd. And on September 3rd, Jack Crosby went down to Cop City. And I want you to see this. This looks like a scene out of Portland. It looks like a scene out of Seattle. It could have been in Austin. Except for the trees, it could have been Brooklyn or down in DC out of 2020. These are the individuals who have taken over property that isn't theirs to dissuade the improvement of the quality of life for the people of the city of Atlanta. And this is coming from, again, this is coming from Rolling Stone, the right. This is a left-leaning organization. And what he starts off with, when he went down to the Defend the Forest organization, which is basically Antifa and their latest new name. They change their name on a regular basis. Like most organizations of the far left, they have lots of names and very few members. And they constantly add more and more names to make it sound like they are a much bigger organization with much more support than they actually have. And they know that many people are not in favor of Antifa. Many people are not in favor of the BLM tactics that led to riots across this nation. They know that their approval rating has dropped since 2020 as people calmed down and reflected on what they did. So instead they use new names, like Defend the Forest. And this Rolling Stone reporter, the first thing that he noticed is that these wonderful, peaceful people, as reported by the rest of the left-leaning news media, peaceful people who have no intent to do anything but hug trees. Well, on September 3rd, the first thing that he saw was that they were actively attacking an individual doing his job. An individual who was told to cut down some of the trees as the city of Atlanta had authorized, and they attacked him. They violently attacked him, destroyed his vehicle, and police, who merely were trying to get his vehicle back, were ridiculed and threatened. These are the peaceful people of Defend the Forest. These are the peaceful people that were arrested, as reported by Andy No. These are the peaceful people who were arrested for terrorism. And these are the people who are trying to stop Cop City, something to improve the quality of life of citizens in Atlanta. Now, I want you, before I go into this further, I want you to take a look at the images. These images could have come from 2020. These are the images of what they want you to see. That this is an illegal insurrectionist takeover of property that doesn't belong to this group of thugs. And they've claimed it as their own because they want to, because they feel like they are justified in doing that. But look at these images that we are seeing from Rolling Stone. You are now leaving the USA. How much more can they say that they are criminals, that they have broken the law? They are insurrectionists because they have abandoned the local, state, and federal laws of the United States. This is from the Rolling Stone, but you're not supposed to look at it negatively. That's positive. And they want you to think, well, this is all about peace and love. Look at this wonderful image of all these people together listening to music. These are just good people protecting nature and the world. Except the first thing that he had to tell you about these people is they're violent. And he describes their actions of violence against an innocent individual just doing their job. An individual is doing a job that the city of Atlanta approved. We can see that he mentions the decentralized autonomous movement. This is an autonomous zone. They don't want to say that because they know when you hear autonomous zone, you think negatively of that, as you should. But this is an insurrectionist movement. This decentralized autonomous movement, this autonomous zone, this insurrection zone, as they call themselves, consists of hundreds of local and out-of-state activists, people from other states coming to Atlanta to enforce their will, their ideology on something that the people of Atlanta and those elected officials for Atlanta, elected by the people to enact the will of the people, they want to controvert that. They want to have their will, their desires imposed on people that they know nothing about, out-of-state activists. Several dozen of whom live in the woods in ramshackle networks of tents and tree houses erected dozens of feet off the floor. This is what they do. By the day, the group hosts meals and food that they get from various collection activities coming from outside groups, as well as teach-ins on resistant tactics, philosophies, skill shares, guided hikes, and other community events. They are teaching and spreading their ideology of violence, of insurrection. That's what this is about. That's what this group is about. Defund the Atlanta Forest is about insurrection. It's about autonomous zones. It's about changing America fundamentally, whether you want it or not, because these aren't people from Atlanta. These are people from everywhere else. And they are more than happy to use violence to push their agenda. In fact, this is why they keep having individuals, again, not from 7 months ago when Andy No had first mentioned that these individuals were being arrested, but then 7 months later, in December, domestic terrorism was charged against 5 additional individuals from this same Antifa autonomous zone in Atlanta. They are so violent that now we are seeing that around the world they're noticing that these autonomous zones, these Antifa protesters, are trying to threaten the city of Atlanta. Individuals who aren't from Atlanta are threatening the people of Atlanta, saying that they are going to suffer because they want a night of rage. They want to attack the city of Atlanta, the people of Atlanta, the police of Atlanta, who are defending and protecting the people. They want to attack them because they're upset. Because they, the Antifa protesters, had an insurrection. They violated the law, every law. They are trying to instill their will. They captured land. They've taken over property. They've stolen. And they have used force against the lawfully elected officials and the police. I want to go to, before I go any further, let's look at how the Daily Beast, a far left-leaning organization, how did they look at this? They're telling you that how police protests in Atlanta launched a domestic terrorism war zone. And at least they're honest that this is a domestic terrorism war zone. This is violent. Molotov cocktails, threatening messages. And then there's police raids, a dead protester, BLM-style activism, otherwise known as Antifa, got way more complicated. They want you to side with the terrorists, the people who took over the land illegally, who have rejected the laws at the local, state, and federal level of the United States illegally, individuals who have come from various states to support this illegal action, this insurrection. They, at the Daily Beast, want you to think that is a great idea. They talk to an individual in their story, a 25-year-old man who is identified as Timothy Murphy. And this individual that goes by a separate name that they won't tell you, I wonder why, that this individual, well, he's just a tree-hugging, wonderful guy, sitting up in a tree, not doing anything. He is a tree sitter. He's there because he's an environmentalist, wants to protect the trees. He's sitting in the trees against the police, even as the police are getting into a shooting altercation with members of his insurrectionist group. He's just going to sit in those trees forever, even if he doesn't have any food for 16 hours. He doesn't have water for 16 hours. And he's sore, and his stomach's growling, and you should feel for this guy. Except he's a domestic terrorist. And the people that he is with, who agree with him and trying to protect the trees rather than the people, rather than training police, they don't want any police, and they want you to live by their rules. And they are using the Defend the Atlanta Forest, are using Molotov cocktails against the police. They're using guns against the police and others who do not agree with them. But the Daily Beast wants you to feel like that's a good thing. That's okay. That these people have given death threats because these people to defend the Atlanta forest, because they have given death threats, they have destroyed property outside of the forest, the contested area, and in the contested area, and that resulted in a shooting incident. Well, it's okay because they're BLM. They're Antifa. They must be on the right side of history. They must be the good guys, and you must agree with them, even though all evidence says otherwise. In fact, when I say that this is something that this is a night of rage that is going to threaten individual citizens, this comes from their own. Now, they have since been removed from Twitter. They have been removed because of their call to violence. And that call to violence, as reported by the Daily Mail, you won't see this in the United States. I will show you. The United States, the mainstream media, they do not want to touch this story. They don't want you to know anything about what I've just said. It was on Twitter, and they said it's a call for retaliation. They claim that the police shot someone. The police claim that they were fired upon and returned fire. Okay, even if you want to say the police fired first, which has not happened for 7 months. The police have had the opportunity to fire on these individuals for 7 months. But today, this just happened, and so they just changed their mind and decided to start shooting these guys out of the blue. Meanwhile, for 7 months, these people that defend the Atlanta forest have been using Molotov cocktails. They have been destroying vehicles and buildings. They have been enacting violence. That has been happening for 7 months. and now the police are the bad guys because they started a fight? That doesn't seem to make sense for the context of what we have seen. What has been reported by the Rolling Stone magazine, a left-leaning magazine itself. So they're saying they want retaliation. Consider this a call for reciprocal violence to be done to the police and their allies. And their allies. What does that mean? Who's an ally of the police? Because I follow the law, I'm an ally of the police? Maybe because you're a Republican, maybe you're a conservative, a libertarian. Maybe you don't believe in Antifa or BLM, even though you're a Democrat. Does that make you an ally? Does that mean that this group can attack you? Because that's what it sounds like they're saying. No wonder they were removed from Twitter. No wonder the left-leaning news media in the United States does not want you to know this is happening and has been happening for at least 7 months. On Friday, today, the 20th, they want you to participate in a night of rage. They want you to be violent. They want you to not just protest, they want you to be insurrectionist. This is a call to insurrection. This is what is an insurrection, where people are being guided by an organization with a purpose to commit violence, to change the law, to change the government, to change the will of the people. This is an act of coercion. This is an act of terrorism. This is an act of insurrection. Let's call it what it is. And sadly, the American public will not know. Most of them will not know because the mainstream news media doesn't want to cover this. They don't want you to know the truth. The Daily Beast is trying to change the story. They want you to sympathize with the criminals. And when we look at the rest of the mainstream media, well, what does the Rolling Stone, the same Rolling Stone that showed us that these individuals initiate violence on their own, to peaceful individuals, that they are willing to be the aggressors. What do they have to say? Cops say slain Atlanta forest protester shot first. Activists aren't so sure. There is a question. There is a problem here. And nobody knows what's going on. And then they hide the rest of the story behind a paywall. Okay. Even if you want to take the side of the BLM Antifa terrorists, and that's what they are. This is insurrection. This is terrorism. Even if you want to take their side, why are they looking for violence? If there is a question, if there is something that they are claiming, that these terrorists, domestic terrorists, are saying that the cops initiated violence. Okay, we need evidence of that. They're saying that the cop was shot by friendly fire. Other cops shot that police officer. Then let's wait for the forensic evidence. And no matter what you think about that, why are the defenders of the Atlanta forest, the Antifa terrorist organization, why are they saying the answer is go out and burn down Atlanta, to go out and commit acts of violence against individuals that had nothing to do with this? Remember, they said commit acts of violence against the allies of police. Even if you want to say, all police are guilty of this, whether they were in that incident or not, all of them are the same, which is blatantly untrue and insanely myopic. But even if you want to say, okay, all the police are bad and their allies, this is what they're calling for. Violence against allies. What's an ally? Someone who doesn't agree with you? How is that not terrorism? That is meant to put terror into the lives of average citizens, having to question whether or not this organization is going to define them as an ally of the police, their enemy, for whatever reason they want. There is no definition. There's more definition in the guidelines of YouTube and Facebook than there is in what's being described here. And even Rolling Stone magazine recognizes there's confusion here. This doesn't make sense. But what are we left with? It's Friday night. The sun is setting. The COB is increasing their police activity. They're going to try and protect the public. And Antifa has said that they are going to try and burn it down. They're going to try and be violent because their feelings are hurt, because they are upset, because they aren't getting what they want. So the only answer, the only result is violence, not the court system, not going through elections, not getting the public support by telling people what happened and peacefully getting people to come together and support their ideas. No, the only answer is violence. They have to go out and commit violence, potentially creating yet another time, yet another incident where we will see an 8-year-old child killed. This is what they're asking for. They want a repeat of what happened on July 5th, 2020. They want a couple of parents to turn down the wrong street and be identified as allies of the police because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time and their child was shot to death by these thugs and criminals. And the news media doesn't want to talk about it. You know, if you look it up, and I advise you, look it up for yourself, you won't see this story. The major mainstream news media, they don't want to cover this. The stories just don't exist. Going to DuckDuckGo, and I will show you this on Google as well, but if you go to DuckDuckGo and you put in autonomous zones in America 2023, I want you to see. You know what you're going to see here, and I'm just scrolling through. You got stories from 2020, but you will not see any story from the left since then. Since 2020, they will not talk about this. They will not let you know this. No one on the left is going to mention autonomous zones, what they are, how they are insurrectionists. They will not mention the damage. They won't even mention that they exist at this time. Let's go right now, and I'm going to type it in as you're watching me, and I'm going to put in let's see, Cop City. Cop City, Atlanta. NBC News, man killed as trooper shot. Okay. Cop City shooting. Stop Cop City. The news from NBC, man killed, trooper shot as Cop City protesters are cleared from Atlanta Police Training Center. They're being pushed out of the forest. Cop City shooting. GBI releases names of man killed by officers arrested during sweep. Person killed during Cop City clash identified. 7 others faced domestic terrorism charges 1 day ago. This is in addition to the previous charges of domestic terrorism that has been going on for 7 months. But what are we not seeing here? What we're not seeing is the news media is telling you that on January 20th, that these same protesters, these same defenders of Atlanta forest are going to try and commit acts of violence, a night of rage. Not one of them are mentioning this. And even when you look at this, Atlanta police kill forest defender. He's not a defender. He's a criminal. They stole the property. They attacked people peacefully trying to do their jobs. You can't call them a forest defender. They're not defending anything. They have taken over at protest encampment near proposed Cop City Training Center. No GSPM, no body cams in deadly shooting. But other agencies may have recorded the aftermath. There is evidence. Bogus charges. 7 charged with domestic terrorism. Georgia trooper stable. What you're not seeing, and you have to go down to, and what do you see? Fox News is the one who says the protesters are calling for violence. Something that we see being reported by the Daily Mail. You have to go into another country's news to find out the truth about what's happening in America and the threat against American citizens. You have to go to the United Kingdom? NBC News, CBS, all of the mainstream major media, The left-leaning news media don't want to tell the people of Atlanta to protect themselves and to be aware that this group of terrorist thugs want to commit violence in their city that may affect their lives, that may once again kill 8-year-old children. They don't want to talk about that. You have to go over to the foreign news to find out what's happening in America. So what do we have in this summary? In summation, what have we learned? What are we seeing here? Well, let me go back to the first thing that I started this with. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. This is hell. In Atlanta, the people forgot that in trying to raise up a criminal, Rayshard Brooks, for doing violent acts, the result was burning down private property and killing a child. That's not worth it. They're not equal. That running around, that a group of people just running around expressing their feelings and trying to pose their feelings and their desires on the public is not a positive. This doesn't result in anything beneficial to anyone. And they have forgotten that lesson from 2020. And therefore, they are doomed and they are repeating that same process. Once again, we have a group of thugs and criminals from various places around the country coming into Atlanta to train people to violate the laws at local, state, and federal levels to become insurrectionists in their homes and their backyards. And those same individuals have been documented multiple times for many months of committing acts of violence because they want to impose their will on you, regardless of who's elected or what the people want. And they're continuing to get escalation. And now they are escalating that to roam around and attack anyone they label as an ally of their enemy, which would be the police. Anyone who is an ally, any law-abiding citizen, is technically an ally of the police and therefore an enemy of Defend the Atlanta Forest, BLM, Antifa, and the far left progressive socialist ideology. They're willing to enact violence against anyone. Perhaps this is why so many people, especially black women, have been buying firearms, have been getting their first time or becoming first time gun owners. Perhaps this is why people have less and less faith in Democrats and the Democratic ideology that has been promoting this, or at the very least denying the existence of this. This is like Jerry Nadler all over again. When Jerry Nadler was asked, does Antifa exist? Does the violence exist? Even though there is video evidence of this, even as individuals are being killed in Atlanta, being killed in Seattle, in Portland, and Jerry Nadler goes, no, it's not real. The bodies are there. He's seen the video of the bodies, and he says, it's not real. It doesn't exist. We must learn from our past. And the lesson here is, what is an insurrection? An insurrection is Defend the Atlanta Forest. It's BLM, it's Antifa. It is tactics that say that they will create an autonomous zone. They will go in and capture American soil, your land, and take you prisoner and impose their will on you, violating every local, state, and federal law. That's what we need to remember. That's what these autonomous zones are. We've said it before for many times throughout the years, and we will say it again because we are not afraid of these terrorists. We oppose this. The people of Atlanta should never have to be afraid of a night of rage, of Antifa and other like-minded left-leaning organizations rampaging through their homes in their city because these far left groups think they're the good guys. I'm sorry, that doesn't justify violence. Even if they think that one of their allies was wrongfully killed, it doesn't justify rampant, random violence. No, those are the acts of dictators, of authoritarians, of terrorists. Those aren't the thoughts and actions of a willful, beneficial organization. These are people who are trying to tell you, obey. Don't think. Don't speak. Just obey. And at the very least, stay silent and get out of their way, because they're going to take control. And if you don't, they're going to harm you, either directly or through their actions in your community. We are opposed to autonomous zones. We always have been. They are insurrectionists. They are anti-American. They are a violation of everything that the Constitution stands for. And American people do not support them, by and large, overwhelmingly. But we're also not afraid to speak out against them. And we need more people to do that. If you want your neighborhood to be subject to a night of rage, one day to have these same like-minded Antifa, BLM terrorists to come into your neighborhood and do the same thing to you, no problem. Don't think about it. Don't look at this video. Don't share it with anyone. Don't like it. Just ignore it. And then one day they will be at your door with whatever their issue is in your city, in your community, telling you that you will obey or they will be violent against you and force their will on you. That's all you have to do. Just ignore it all. Or maybe share this video, like this video. Tell people in your community that this is unacceptable. Even if they think they have an issue to complain about, even if they think that they have something that they want to fight for, that does not mean they get to have random violence against innocent individuals, and they do not get to break the local, state, and federal laws of this nation. It's that simple. No, anarchy is not the answer. Terrorism is not the answer. And it's time that we keep saying that nice and loud, because the left-leaning news media may not want to say it. I sure as hell will. I thank you for taking the time to be here with us. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. Do you support the defenders of Atlanta Forest? Do you think that their acts of domestic terrorism are justified? Do you think it's right that the defenders of Atlanta Forest are justified in going into the city of Atlanta and threatening people's lives and property? Do you think that's right? I'd like to see your comments on that. And I hope you will join us this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk about this and all the issues that matter to you across the world. Thank you.